Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to every living being everywhere. So good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. Just a couple of announcements this morning. Well, first, the announcement that the status quo for the rest of the month will remain in place as far as the chapel goes and as far as the monastery goes. The chapel is open for private meditation and for arati. Evening arati takes place right around sundown. And otherwise, if you wish to visit in the monastery, please send me an email and I'll give you with your phone number and I'll give you a call and we'll make that arrangement. Otherwise, there are two announcements. Thanksgiving falls on Thursday, November 26th this year. We will celebrate together for a time with a special Zoom meeting that afternoon. Details to be announced next Sunday, the 15th, when the talk will be on giving thanks. Information will also appear on the website, on our Facebook page, and in your e-newsletter. And for those of you who are new to us and haven't subscribed to the e-newsletter, please do go on the website and subscribe, because it's just a 5-minute read each week, and it keeps you very well informed about what's going on with the center. Now, our next celebration, our next puja, our next worship service will be Holy Mother's Puja, her birthday celebration for Sri Sharda Devi. That will be held on Sunday, January the 3rd, 2021. Again, it's not likely that it will be a public celebration. It will be, as Durga Puja was, it will be streamed live over Zoom on Facebook and YouTube. But we don't know yet who will be our pujari, but I'm hoping that we can have Dhruva with us, because he always has something wonderful to tell us about Mother. He's a great Mother devotee, and so I'm hoping we can get Dhruva here. Unless there's something that I've forgotten that someone wants to announce. Is there anything I've forgotten or should have announced that I didn't?
Brother Shankara, I just had a question.
Yes, dear.
About next week. It's Kali Puja.
Yes, well, we won't be celebrating Kali Puja here. Kali Puja is too complex to do just with one pujari. So it requires more than one. And also, we don't like to celebrate it without an image, that is to say, an actual murti, as they do in Hollywood and elsewhere. The Kali Pujas from Hollywood, and also if you want to be in the Eastern time zone, the Kali Puja will be streamed from Vivekananda Retreat Ridgely. Pravrajaka Gita Prana, the nun in charge of the Vivekananda Retreat, is a great Kali devotee, and will stream their Kali Puja live from there. thanks for bringing that up. That's definitely Kali Puja is there, but it's not something we've ever celebrated here.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay. There is no song this morning. There will be a poem, a couple of poems in the talk. November is a month for the study of Raja Yoga, a spiritual path often called the yoga of meditation. As a Raja Yogi, you use ancient, proven spiritual techniques to quiet your mind and gain control of your attention. Regular daily practice of Raja Yoga increases your ability to concentrate and may lead to meditation. This can unite you with the divine presence, the source of your being, and liberate you from the cycle of rebirth and death. Raja Yogis call this state of liberation kaivalya, independence. Now, please understand that what is going to be said this morning is not personal instruction for you. It's not something you're expected to adopt. It is information for you to use as you see fit and adapt and use to enhance your own spiritual journey. There are very few real Raja Yogis. It's a very demanding path, and householders find it difficult to become a full-out Raja Yogi. That doesn't mean that there isn't something here for you, otherwise it wouldn't be talked about. There is something for each of us, as you will hear. So the title of this morning's talk is Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga. We'll start with the last lines of a song from Girish Ghosh's play, The Life of Buddha. Like water in a stream, we cannot stay at rest. Onward we flow for evermore. But burst thou our slumber's bars, O thou that art awake. How long must we remain enmeshed in fruitless dreams? Are you indeed awake? Then do not longer sleep. Thick on you lies the gloom, fraught with a million woes. Raise, dreamer from your dream, and slumber not again. Shine forth, O shining one, and with thy shafts of light, slay thou the blinding dark. O our only Savior thou, we seek deliverance at thy feet. Now this is from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. You can find it on page 871, the full song, if that appealed to you. The song sings of samsara, your life in the world. Yet other than taking refuge with the divine being, are you helpless? Swami Vivekananda, who I'll refer to often during the rest of the talk as Swamiji, Swami Vivekananda, Swamiji, says emphatically, you are not helpless. Swamiji wrote the book Raja Yoga as a commentary on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. The book was published in 1896 and very soon became an international bestseller. In the preface, Swamiji said, Raja Yoga declares that each man and woman, Raja Yoga declares that each man is only a conduit for the infinite ocean of knowledge and power that lies behind mankind. I'm going to read that opening sentence again. Just think about this in terms of yourself. Raja Yoga declares that you are only a conduit for the infinite ocean of knowledge and power that lies behind mankind. Raja Yoga teaches that desires and wants are in man that the power of supply is also in man, and that whatever and whenever a desire, a wish, a prayer has been fulfilled, it is out of this infinite supply that came, and not from any supernatural being. There is no supernatural, says the yogi. Instead, there are in nature gross manifestations and subtle manifestations. The subtle are the causes, the gross the effects. The gross can be easily perceived by the senses, not so the subtle. The practice of Raja Yoga will lead you to acquisition of the more subtle perceptions. So that's the promise. That last sentence is a big promise with even bigger implications. Raja Yoga will lead to the acquisition of the more subtle perceptions, those that are the causes of the effects that we experience in the outer world. So that's a big promise with even bigger implications. Once causes are understood, their effects can be stopped. This yields relief from the bondage of small self, the small ego-bound self, since even thoughts are the effects of subtle causes. Now, many of you who are students of this for a time know that these ideas are from Sankhya philosophy, which is the basis of Raja Yoga and yoga philosophy. So that's the frame of reference from which Swamiji is speaking here, that there is this gross manifestation, behind that is the subtle manifestation, behind that is the divine presence. So this morning we will explore some of Swamiji's and Patanjali's teachings with emphasis on the step-by-step spiritual growth that can come, the step-by-step spiritual growth that can come from the practice of Raja Yoga. As I said earlier, each of us can adapt this to our own spiritual path. We don't have to become a full-on Raja Yogi, though that is an ideal state for a human being to achieve. It's very hard to do that and live a life in the world. However, as we hear in this ancient prayer, which speaks to the ocean of knowledge and power that Swamiji says lies behind mankind, it is within each of us and may be known to you. It may be known to you. So this ancient prayer speaks to the ocean of knowledge and power that Swamiji says lies behind you as a member of mankind. It's within you, though it may now be unknown to you. This is the prayer. You are the source of You are the source of infinite energy. Fill me with that energy. You are the source of infinite strength. Endow me with that strength. You are the source of infinite courage. Inspire me with that courage. You are the source of infinite fortitude. Grant me that fortitude. Now, this is the promise of all spiritual paths, but it's very directly the promise of Raja Yoga, that energy, that strength, that courage, that fortitude are just behind what appears to be our helplessness in face of our desires, our attachments, our aversions, our anger, our lust, all of the things that are obstacles to spiritual growth, that just behind is all of this strength, courage, fortitude, energy. So Swami Vivekananda was persuaded to write the book Raja Yoga by his disciples, particularly his English disciples. He told them that he probably wouldn't be back to Great Britain after he gave his lectures there in 1895. So they said, "Oh, Swamiji, you've given us so much, but we want something written that we can follow. Give us a guidebook. Give us a guidebook." And so that's what persuaded him. And when he got back to Chicago, he consulted with his American disciples as well. And they said, "Yes, yes, Swamiji, please do write this book." So Swami Vivekananda was persuaded to write the book Raja Yoga by his disciples. Relying on his training by Sri Ramakrishna and the master's continuing inspiration, Swamiji wrote it as a guidebook for Westerners who have more than a casual interest in meditation. Pointing directly at the goal of human life, Vivekananda wrote, "Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity within by controlling nature, external and internal. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, by one or more or all of these, and be free. This is the whole of religion. Doctrines or dogmas or rituals or books or temples or forms are but secondary details." And since that's the heart of this talk, I'm going to read it again. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity within by controlling nature, external and internal. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, by one or more or all of these, and be free. This is the whole of religion. Doctrines or dogmas or rituals or books or temples or forms are but secondary details. So a little explanation. What does it mean, potentially divine? It's that infinitude, that infinite power that is behind the appearance, behind our distracted minds. It's like power in a battery. Until you connect the two, the anode and cathode of a battery, you don't know there's energy in that battery. That energy is potential. When you make the connection, then you know there's energy there. That energy, that great truth and knowledge and energy and courage and fortitude is within us. That's what he means by potentially. Doesn't mean maybe. He means it's there. It's just not accessed. And what does he mean by these four things that he names? By work, that's karma yoga, the yoga of action. Do this either by work, karma yoga, or worship, bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion, or psychic control, raja yoga, the yoga of contemplation, concentration, and meditation, or by philosophy. Philosophy is the wisdom path, the jnana path, the intellectual path, the non-dual path. So he says, do it by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, by one or more of these, and be free. And then he says, this is the whole of religion, using these spiritual paths to gain your freedom from limitation. Freedom from limitation, true happiness, true bliss. And he says, all the rest that surrounds that, important as it may be, particularly at certain stages of our spiritual growth, They are secondary details. Swami Vivekananda's favorite Upanishad was the Katha Upanishad. The Upanishads, as we know, are the distillation of truth from the Vedas and give us truth in a condensed and short form. The Katha Upanishad is one of the principal Upanishads, and as I said, it was Swami Vivekananda's favorite. Here's a quote. "It is but few who hear about this self. Fewer still dedicate their lives to its realization. Wonderful is he who speaks of the self. Rare are they who make it the supreme goal of their life. Blessed are they who, through an illumined teacher, attain to self-realization." Now, of course, Swami Vivekananda is quite clearly an illumined teacher. So we can listen. Whether we have a teacher in the flesh is a matter of our desire. We'll talk about that another time, about Guru and how Guru comes into our lives. But the scriptures, and particularly those of, we believe, of those teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, Swami Vivekananda, and Swami Brahmananda, and the rest of the direct disciples, these are the teachings of illumined teachers. So blessed are they who, through an illumined teacher, attain to self-realization. So what are we doing here this morning? So many of us are here. We gather each week to help each other study the art of spirituality. We gather each week to help each other overcome our limitations, our human limitations, and become free. It is the greatest joy to share this knowledge with one another. So again, thank you for being here this morning. Thank you for doing this with us. Many of you know the name Swami Chinmoyananda. He has an organization of his own, the Chinmoyananda Mission, and they're very active and wonderful, wonderful people. But I'd like to just read a small quote from Swami Chinmoyananda because it so pertains to what we're talking about. Swami Chinmoyananda said, "What I do not know, I cannot think about. What I do not know, I cannot think about. The present boundaries of my knowledge are the outermost frontiers to which my mind can run and pervade." We're limited by what we know. So what's the conclusion to reach from that? It follows that as knowledge is drawn from within you by what you learn and experience through your spiritual practices, the frontiers of your mind expand. As knowledge is drawn from within you by what you learn and experience through your spiritual practices, the frontiers of your mind expand. What before seemed impossible may begin to appear as a possibility, something you can indeed bring within your grasp. You come to understand things you did not understand before. This knowledge prompts you to think, speak, and act differently, which is the very definition of spiritual progress. Now, those of you who know Swami Vivekananda and the vector of his life, this cyclonic monk, as he was called by the St. Louis newspaper at the time he was alive here in the United States, this cyclonic monk. Swamiji's heart was limitless in its love and compassion for us. Swamiji yearned for each of you to access the illimitable source of knowledge within, your everlasting birthright, and manifest your divinity. Raja Yoga, the yoga of psychic control, of meditation, and other special techniques, is one gateway to your birthright, one path by which you can overcome this world. We know who said, I have overcome this world. It was the Christ. And he also said, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Now, before we go on to complete the rest of the talk, let's pause, because it doesn't do to try to build knowledge on questions and doubt. So if any of you have any questions, any comments, any doubts that need to be resolved about what's been said so far, please, we're just about halfway through the hour. We can do this together now. This is where we share with one another. And you may find, as you express a question or make a comment or share a doubt, that some others have the same feelings or thoughts. So please, any comments, questions about what we've talked about so far?
Could you explain psychic to me?
Psychic. Psychic is the internal, the subtle aspect of our thoughts. There's our waking awareness, which is full of our ordinary experiences and thoughts. Behind that is a deeper level. Some people call it the active subconscious, the realm of psychic power. There's psychic powers, as we see in chapter 3 of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. As we access that psychic level and learn to control our attention, there's a great deal more power there. But it is the level behind the active waking awareness. Behind that is the active subconscious, which is where the causes are becoming effects. And behind that is the deeper level yet of the latent subconscious or unconscious, where the causes lie. And we discover them through controlling our waking awareness, and later controlling our active subconscious, coming to know the contents of both our waking awareness and our active subconscious. We gain knowledge of this psychic realm in the active subconscious, and then behind that is the realm of silence, wherein all of these causes are manifesting their effects. Very good question. Thank you. And I'm sure other people were wondering too what psychic meant in this context.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Brother Shankara, this is Haima.
Yes, Haima.
I just have one comment from your readings. It's a powerful statement. Once our causes are understood, their effects can be stopped, and thoughts are the effects of subtle causes. I thought that is a very, very powerful statement, because our journey, the spiritual whole journey, is finding the causes.
Yes.
For some of our negative, positive behaviors, and how we can stop them, improve them, and get the illumination of our soul. So
perfectly said. Perfectly said, Haima. Yes.
We need to understand those causes that are covered by the toxins all throughout our life.
Yes.
We can move towards the illumination of our Oh,
and it is there according to the saints.
yes,
Vivekananda is one. It is there for each one of us. It's
exactly.
not something that is special to some and not available to you. No,
Yeah.
it is available to you. And what keeps us from it are the distractions, the
Yeah.
constant movements of our waking awareness and the more subtle movements of our active subconscious.
That's right.
Our we experience, most people experience their active subconscious only in daydreams and in sleep dreams. That's where we experience it. We gain no control over it. I'm not talking about lucid dreaming here, although lucid dreaming is also a technique. But I'm talking about what happens when you practice contemplation, concentration, and meditation.
Yes.
You gain access to these deeper levels. You sink below the level of your waking awareness, thoughts, and distractions, and you become aware of a different realm, which, in answer to Beverly's question, was defined as the psychic realm.
And
Thank you,
sometimes we have to, like Don Juan says, drop your personal history. I liked that. I've been reading Don Juan's book, the Carlos Castaneda.
Mm-hmm.
He says, drop the personal history. That is very, very useful.
Oh yes, when we can renounce our personal history,
Yeah,
we gain access to a different level of understanding of ourselves, because
exactly.
all of that belief we have in our personal history is just another form of limitation.
That's right. Thank you, Brother Shankara.
Thank you, and I'm really glad you're reading that book, dear. She's speaking about Don Juan Matus, the great Toltec spiritual master, brujo as it's called in Spanish, and his apprentice, Carlos Castaneda. And there's a book called Journey to Ixtlan that is the story of Castaneda's learning to overcome the world according to Don Juan's teachings. Anything else from anyone? And there are many, many parallels in that book between Don Juan's teachings and the teachings of Raja Yoga.
Brother, this is Katrina.
Yes, Katrina.
In terms of, I say we have to get beyond the conscious and go to that first level of consciousness that is we're unaware of, right? And so we do that through contemplation or
contemplation of the truths until
Okay.
we become convinced of their, until we have faith, that a working faith, not a blind faith, a working faith in their truth. This allows us then to concentrate on those truths.
Okay.
And as we concentrate on those truths, and we may use various ways to do this, mantras or visualization or watching our breath, we gain access to those truths of the subtle mind, the psychic consciousness, the active subconscious. And then we begin to see what it is that's producing our behaviors, what's producing our limitations. And we can then control those thought waves through the techniques of Raja Yoga, which is what we're going to talk about next. And through those techniques, we actually do gain control of those things that are manifesting the activities of our waking awareness. So we gain some sense of the effects of the causes. And then when we go yet deeper, we see the actual causes themselves. And we see them in action. We see them in action. We see them actually producing their effects. And that's when we can stop the effects before they even manifest as a thought, a spoken word, or an action.
Okay, okay, okay.
Thank
And
you for the question, Katrina. Very good question.
okay, you're welcome. And then the truth that we're contemplating is that when you said that the energy, the strength, the fortitude, and the courage all lies within us. So is that the truth that we're contemplating?
That's one of the truths that we're contemplating. And what we're seeing is that all of those wonderful attributes arise from our divine being,
Okay.
that potential that we are unaware of in our waking awareness.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Thank you.
Normally aware. We all have peak experiences where we have some sense of these things.
Okay. Okay,
Thank
great.
you, Katrina.
Thank you.
Anyone else, dears?
Brother
All right.
Shankara,
Yes, please go ahead. Bhagirath.
yes.
Yes, dear.
I was thinking about an anecdotal episode where King Napoleon, in his library, he kept all the books of the religion in the section of the political books.
Huh.
To me, this is in many ways very instructive, because the key word in what you say, according to me, is meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to put the book on meditation, a Buddhist will put in the Buddhist books of religion. A Hindu will come, pull it out, and put it in the Hindu books of religion.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone from Christianity says, "What is meditation? Never heard of that one."
Yes.
You see,
Some
idea,
Christians say
the
that.
idea is, to me, the knowledge is, like we say, light. The light, when it goes through the kind of lens which diffracts the light, there is a scattered beam.
Mm-hmm.
It does not produce any effect. But if you put it through a convex lens,
Mm-hmm.
it will zero in and will start burning.
Mm-hmm.
That zero in to burn away the different faculties and episodes of life in which we are entrapped, that perhaps is best brought about by meditation.
Yes.
At least will give you a
Meditation
few
is
moments in which
meditation.
you detach yourself.
I'm sorry, Bhagirath, I interrupted you. What did you say again?
I said, in these distractions in which we are entrapped, even a few moments of meditation and here and there will bring you back to that beam of light which is concentrating enough to generate enough heat to create a fire.
Yes, indeed. And the more we practice contemplation, concentration, and meditation, the more controlled our thoughts become, the more focused our attention becomes, and the more penetrating our gaze becomes, and we see the knowledge that lies behind. We understand it in a way that we just couldn't even conceive of before. Thank you, Bhagirath. You're absolutely right. So, anything else? All right. According to Patanjali, what is yoga? Yoga is control of thought waves in the mind. Now, when we think of the mind, we think of something that is in the head. No. Actually, the word in Sanskrit is chitta, the mind stuff. It exists throughout our corporeal being, our body. And actually, there's evidence that it exists in an etheric egg that surrounds us. That's a whole other story, and we won't try and go into it. But we are we extend out to approximately the length of our arms as a being. So, according to Patanjali, yoga is control of the thought waves, the vrittis in Sanskrit, in the chitta, the mind stuff. So what does yoga achieve by this control? You gain the ability to abide in your real nature and to live and act in the world from that inner sanctuary. I'll repeat that. What does yoga achieve by this control of thought waves in the mind stuff? You gain the ability to abide in your real nature and to live and act in the world from that inner sanctuary. What is your real, your true original nature? The word that the yogis use is Atman, Atman, the eternal, unborn, and undying, invincible and indestructible Atman, which is one with Brahman. Brahman is that which is both active and unknowable. There's the unknowable aspect of Brahman, nirguna Brahman, Brahman without the gunas, the instruments of action, and saguna Brahman. Saguna Brahman, that aspect of Brahman that is active as vibration. And as vibration, it exists for us as the Atman. Each of us has this Atman within us. It is our true original nature. It is what is manifesting all of this subtle and gross body. And it is, and when we are able to abide there, all of our abilities change, and which enables us to live much more happily, much more freely, and not be so entangled by the world, not be so limited by the world. So how does Raja Yoga get you from here, quite literally here and now, peering out from your screen on a Sunday morning, to realization of your true original nature? Now, some of you quite legitimately may think to yourself, oh, don't even tell me. That sounds like such a long, rough road from here today to realization. And here is the question that follows quite naturally. What will I gain more quickly than I would otherwise from the persistent practice of yoga? What will I gain more quickly than I would otherwise from the persistent practice of yoga? Because it's not an easy thing to do, as we'll see. And so here's the question. Here's the answer to the question. At least here's part of the answer. A summary of Raja Yoga, which Swami Vivekananda said he freely translated from one of the Puranas. And I'll start the quote. So this is Swami Vivekananda's free translation from one of the Puranas. Quote, "The fire of yoga burns the cage of ignorance and error that surrounds a person. Knowledge becomes purified, and nirvana is directly obtained." By that he means experienced. So the fire of yoga burns the cage of ignorance and error that is around a man. Knowledge becomes purified, and nirvana, freedom, bliss, is directly obtained. From yoga comes knowledge. Knowledge again helps the yogi. The quote continues, "Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi are the steps in Raja Yoga, of which non-injury, truthfulness, non-covetousness, chastity, not receiving anything from another, are called yama. This purifies the mind, the chitta, the mind stuff. Never producing pain by thought, word, and deed. This is, continues Swamiji's quote, never producing pain by thought, word, and deed in any living being is what is called ahimsa, non-injury. There is no virtue higher than non-injury. There is no happiness higher than what a man or woman obtains by this attitude of non-offensiveness to all creation. That's the end of the quote. There is no virtue higher than non-injury. There is no happiness higher than what a person obtains by this attitude of non-offensiveness to all creation. End of the quote. And so, as we do this work of psychic control, we take the inner, subtle knowledge of cause and effect gained by Raja Yoga's practices and turn it into action in the world. As Swami Swahananda said, Swami Swahananda was a teacher who was in Southern California from 1976 to 2012. Remarkable Swami. He's the Swami who sent me here. Swami Swahananda said, the only true measure of spiritual progress is change in behavior. That is, taking the inner subtle knowledge of cause and effect gained by Raja Yoga's practices and turning it into action in the world. Now, some of you know these names. For those of you who don't, I'll explain. Swami Atishwarananda was in the United States for a time. He taught in Philadelphia. And Swami Yogeshananda, the Swami who started this center, was his student. So Swami Atishwarananda went back to India and became a vice president of the order. Swami Yogeshananda went on to do many, many things after he encountered. And his spiritual growth continued and continued until in 1982 he founded this center here in Atlanta. So those are two names, Swami Atishwarananda, the teacher, and Swami Yogeshananda, his student. Swami Atishwarananda told his disciple, Swami Yogeshananda, for every one step forward spiritually, you must take 2 steps forward morally and ethically. These are the first steps in Raja Yoga, the yamas and the niyamas, as we've heard. So we take this knowledge that we gain through learning psychic control, penetrating the distractions of our waking awareness. And as the Swami said, Swami Vivekananda said, never producing pain by thought, word, and deed in any living being, and working to prevent others from injuring any living being by thought, word, or deed, is a great way to start down Raja Yoga's spiritual path. If we begin to exercise that restraint, wait a minute, this will be harmful. This will be harmful. I can't say this to that person, though it be true. I can't say it to them because it will cause them pain. I can't do this because it will cause pain. I have to do this instead because it will cause the opposite of pain. Not pleasure, but joy and freedom. As we conclude, let's review. Practice of yoga can allow you to understand Swami Vivekananda when he writes. I'm going to repeat that. Practice of yoga can allow you to understand Swami Vivekananda when he writes, there is no supernatural, says the yogi. Instead, there are in nature gross manifestations and subtle manifestations. The subtle are the causes. The gross are the effects. The gross can be easily perceived by the senses, not so the subtle. The practice of Raja Yoga will lead to the acquisition of the more subtle perceptions. That is a very big promise with even bigger implications. Now that was the end of the quote from Swamiji. Now this is me talking. That is a very big promise with even bigger implications. Once causes are understood, their effects can be stopped, since your every thought and action is the effect of such subtle causes. As you gain the more subtle perceptions, you understand things you did not understand before. For example, we hear in the prayer that we offer before taking food, called Om Brahmarpanam, we hear this phrase: when you see Brahman in every action, you attain to Brahman. This is said by Sri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. When you see Brahman, that is the Brahman in action, the Saguna Brahman, when you see Saguna Brahman in every action, you attain to Brahman. What does that mean? Attaining to Brahman means becoming that, understanding that in a way that affects your every action. You can understand what that means by the practice of Raja Yoga. You actually see the vibrations. You actually feel the vibrations that are each action. And as the great sage Vasishta told Lord Rama when he was teaching him, all that you experience is nothing more than a vibration of consciousness. So that Saguna Brahman in every action is a vibration of consciousness. But that's an idea until you actually feel it, actually see it. This knowledge allows you, actually prompts you to think, speak, and act differently, which is the definition of spiritual progress. Good. It's not quite noon. That concludes the talk, but it does not conclude our time together, because once again, now it's your opportunity to be part of this as we study the art of spirituality together. What questions, what doubts do you have? What comments would you like to make to share with others your understanding? All of this is so important for us as we do this together. Anything at all from anyone?
I'll say something.
Mm-hmm.
This is just a comment. I had not heard that what Yatishwarananda said to Yogeshananda, that quote, in a while, about for every step forward spiritually, you must take 2 steps forward. Is it morally and ethically? Is that what?
Morally and ethically. Yes.
Ethically, because so often we just focus on our spiritual practice while we're actually meditating or whatever our practice is. And we forget the second part. And as soon as we're not practicing or we're caught up in something that's going on in the world, it just kind of falls apart and we do things that seem, oh, I can't believe I did that, looking back later. So it really is important, and it's an important thing right now in the world today,
Yes.
in not, in our own forgetfulness about what's real and what's really important, saying something to somebody that's going to hurt them.
Yes.
It's just too easy to do that. So I love that quote, and I remember it, but I hadn't heard it in a while. So thanks for including that in the talk.
The reason it was included, although I didn't say it at the time that I read it, is the morally and ethically points directly to the yamas and niyamas, the restraints and observances of the restraints are the morally part. The ethically is the observances part, the niyamas. So for every one step forward spiritually, we must take 2 steps forward, morally and ethically. That is to say, practice the yamas and niyamas. And when we do, which is, of course, exerting a control on our minds, on our actions, replacing the lower with the higher, that's what the observances are about, the ethical parts. And so thank you, Cindy, for bringing that out. It is very key to this.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, Uma.
could you elaborate on the connection between Sankhya and Swamiji's Raj Yoga interpretation? Because to me, Sankhya, as I understand, is the philosophy about the immortality of the soul compared to the body or the mortality, and prana, prakriti, and that discussion. So how do you see Raj Yoga and Sankhya connection?
Okay, beautiful question, Uma. If you remember, Sankhya is based in what is called the 24 cosmic principles. You talked about the highest of these cosmic principles. Okay? But as the divine Prakriti, Purusha, descend, so to speak, into the world of gross manifestation, something arises called the gunas. The gunas, sattva, the guna of goodness, of realization, of clarification, the guna of tamas, which is materialism, inertia, that which is the concealing power. So we have sattva, the revealing power. We have tamas, the revealing, the concealing power. Tamas, materialism, our focus on materialism, and on rajas, the guna of projection, of action, of vanity. These things are all what we see. We see them at work when we penetrate to the active subconscious, and then even more powerfully when we penetrate to the latent subconscious or unconscious. We see the gunas constantly at work, shaping the reality that we experience and prompting our actions. And we are able then to restrain the negative tendencies of tamas, the concealing power, and of rajas, the projecting power, because those are the 2 things that result in our the life that we experience as an ordinary thing before we begin spiritual practice. And we're able to emphasize the revealing power, sattva. So these are absolutely key to the Sankhya. Sankhya actually means enumeration or counting.
Yes.
And so what it does is it says that this descent of spirit into matter happens according to these rules. And it's as elaborate and as detailed and as focused on a vision of reality as chemistry is. As a matter of fact, if you look at the enumeration that goes on in Sankhya, you see a very close parallel with what chemists call the periodic table.
So I would say, Sankhya Yoga, I mean Raj Yoga, is the laboratory of Sankhya.
Yes, very well said.
Yes, it shows the exact behavior and the roots of behavior. That's profound.
Yes, it is profound indeed. And that's why Swami Vivekananda took the trouble to write that book, because his disciples so badly wanted him to explain how to do this.
How to, yes.
Not just how to think about it, but how to do it, how to actually do it.
So it's part two of Sankhya.
Yes.
Raj Yoga.
Well, you know, it's fascinating to study the 24 cosmic principles and how they result in what we see. It's just a different scientific explanation. It's a different kind of science, but it's just as orderly and explanatory as our modern science is.
Thank you.
And just as reductive. Thank you, Uma.
Thank you.
Anything else from anyone?
If we do not understand the connection, Sankhya will be just abstract. But after listening to all these yamas and niyamas and all these steps, it becomes real, practicable.
Yes. We want to first restrain the effects and modify the effects. That is the purpose of the yamas and niyamas.
Yes.
Then we learn. If you want to know more about this, listen to last week's talks, Out on a High Limb. And the last talk in this month, we'll talk about the last two limbs, the last two practices, the last two aspects of Patanjali's yoga, limbs 7 and 8, samadhi and liberation.
Thank you. Sure.
Next week, we're going to talk about giving things.
Wonderful.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
Yes. Could you explain a little bit more about the thoughts and the vrittis? Are they like the vrittis are the subtle aspect of the thoughts, or
No.
they're thought modifications, but do they go at the same time? Like they're not the cause of
vritti is just Sanskrit for thoughts.
Oh, I see.
Vritti means, and the word literally means whirlpool. And what the reason for whirlpool, what does a whirlpool do? It draws you down. Thoughts draw us away from our inherent birthright, knowledge of our true original nature. Thoughts, these things that are generated by the gunas, thoughts and actions are generated by the gunas, the mixture of the three gunas. There are good thoughts, bad thoughts, and all in between. These actions of the gunas, which are not our gunas, they are simply the gunas, constantly at work, constantly they're out of equilibrium, and so are constantly mingling and straining to reach equilibrium. This is what Vivekananda says. So one of the things that they result in is thoughts. Any thought, anything that arises in our waking awareness, and for that matter in our sleep awareness, draws us away from the truth. And it's meant to be that way. It's not that we as the divine being, we designed this system to draw us away from our intuitive knowledge of the truth. Otherwise, there would be no experience of manyness. there wouldn't be this experience of universe. There wouldn't be experience of all of these people who are on the screen right now. In fact, there are not many of us. There's only one. But it's undeniable that we're experiencing many. And it is the effect of the gunas. And one of the effects of the gunas is vrittis, these whirlpools of thought that pull our awareness away from the truth, pull us down to this sense of manyness.
Didn't Holy Mother say, if I am right, that in Kali Yuga, the thoughts, mental is sins, they don't count because they're just
Well,
mental.
it isn't that they don't count, dear, because they affect our actions, but there are no karmic consequences for thought in the Kali Yuga. This is what she said. And she was simply saying what is said in the Vedas, in the Puranas also, that in Kali Yuga, because we are so distracted, this is such a time of distraction that we are not held accountable for our thoughts. We're only held accountable for our speech and our actions. They're the only things that create karmic consequences. And so it's a great blessing that we're not held accountable for our thoughts, that they don't have karmic consequences.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Shankara,
Yes, dear.
to put it slightly humorously, we can describe a Trump state of mind, always in turmoil. Its thought waves going this way, that way, and
Yes.
constantly changing and
Yes.
destructive. So,
Well, there are many ways of looking at the divine being. It's said by my mother it's said of Mother in the Chandi, Mother, don't you destroy asuras by mere sight, but you direct your weapons against them, so that even the inimical ones, purified by the missiles, may attain the higher worlds. And so this must be our prayer for everyone, regardless of how inimical they may seem to us.
So the thoughts do not have a karmic, they do have a karmic effect. Could you explain
Well, dear heart, if they come to speech or action, but the thoughts themselves do not. The vrittis themselves do not have a karmic consequence. If they are allowed to come to speech or action, then they have a karmic consequence, yes.
I see. Okay.
I must have missed class that day because or my memory's bad. I don't remember hearing that before, that Mother said that thoughts did not, and it totally makes sense because of the distractibility. I mean, it's incredible how distracted people are.
Yes, yes.
All the bombardment of information and stressful things being pressed on us from every direction. I love that. That's good. But it's also important to realize that every action and every bit of speech, which is an action, start with a thought. So we still have to work on that.
Well, exactly.
On those
the thought itself, if it's restrained, it's like that saying, always tell the truth, but never tell a harsh truth.
Yeah.
So always tell the truth, but never tell a harsh truth. If we restrain our thoughts of judgment and anger and retribution and all of the things, as Sri Ramakrishna said, in this age, in this iron age, this Kali Yuga, we are so dependent on stimulation. He metaphorized it as food. We're so dependent on food. but stimulation is a kind of food for the other koshas of the body. You know, all of the kind of food is a stimulation for the annamaya kosha, the food body, the external. But the other kinds of sensory stimulation are stimulation for the other sheaths. So he said, we're so dependent on food. And so, yes, it's why he was so compassionate that he took human form to unchain us and set us free.
Could we say that that about, you know, always tell the truth, but never a harsh truth would be like, you know, a truth might be, you know, you're getting ready to fall in that ditch, saying that to somebody. And the harsh truth would be, you're not a very smart person.
Yeah, you're not very alert and aware, are you?
Right. But the first one, you're getting ready to fall in a ditch, is really true.
That would be a compassionate truth.
Yes, but the second, while it may probably be true, is really an opinion.
Well, it's an opinion, and it certainly is a judgment.
Yes, and opinions are a dime a dozen and are never truth.
Yes,
they're just not. My opinion. That's my opinion.
Right. Exactly. Anything else from anyone?
I like it in meditation when you can reach the point where your thoughts come only very slowly.
Yes.
And you almost reach silence. It
Yes.
is so nourishing.
Yes.
To have the yatta of your brain hush up.
Yes. And stop pulling us away from that blissful silence.
Right.
Stop pulling us away. Stop whirlpooling us down away from that blissful silence. Very, very well said, Beverly.
Brother Shankara,
Yes,
the
dear.
thoughts only, I mean, you said only good or bad, but sometimes thoughts don't fall into any category, good or bad. It's like random thoughts, you know.
Well,
I
yeah,
don't know.
as long as they don't turn into action, then they're a distraction, but they're otherwise harmless. They don't create a karmic consequence. Good and bad are both ends of a spectrum. There's all kinds of thoughts in between. The good and bad are the two ends of a spectrum, I should say.
Okay.
Brother Shankara, I have a good example for the thought. You know, I feel like choking that person as long as we don't choke them. It's okay to feel like choking when they make you angry, you know.
Of course, it's okay to feel like you're going to feel it.
As long as you don't go and choke them, that's fine.
Well, and if you don't even tell them I want to choke you.
Exactly. You're right. So that's okay to have the thought. Anger is okay. It's a good, as long as you don't act upon those negative thoughts.
Well, we're going to have this is the effect of the gunas.
Yes,
We're going to have angry thoughts. This is rajas.
Exactly.
Rajas will touch our mental impressions, all those things that are latent in us that come from God knows where. Some people say from past lives, but wherever they come from, they're in us. So something that a person does, it touches what Jill Bolte Taylor calls a neural loop.
Oh, it's
and
amazing.
That neural loop does its thing, and we experience anger. She says if you can restrain it for 90 seconds, the chemistry that produces the anger dissipates. And this is a PhD neuroanatomist telling us the truth about thoughts.
Jill Bolte's book is amazing, and it's blowing my mind away. I started reading. I read 1/3 of it. Boy, it blows your mind away. Her knowledge and depth of knowledge about neuroscience.
What Haima's talking about, what I alluded to, and she's talking about, is a book by a neuroanatomist who had a massive stroke, brain hemorrhage, that took away all of her left brain functions. It's the book is titled "My Stroke of Insight," My Stroke of Insight, and the author is a doctor, PhD, Jill Bolte, B-O-L-T-E, Jill Bolte Taylor. What you find as you read the book is that in recovering all of her left brain functions over an 8-year period, this intense activity, what she did is she discovered many of the things, many of the principles and practices completely independently and on her own. She discovered many of the principles and practices that are in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. It's an amazing book. As Haima said, it will.
Amazing. It'll blow your mind out sometimes.
It'll blow your mind, yeah.
It does. And
I
after,
highly recommend it for any spiritual aspirant,
yes,
simply because from the point of view of a real 100% full out, completely trained scientist,
yes,
here come these same insights that pervade Patanjali's Yoga Sutras.
thanks for the PDF, Brother Shankara. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for mentioning the PDF. Anyone who wants the book and doesn't want to go to the trouble of buying a copy, just send me an email. I'll send you a PDF. And it's completely legit. I mean, it's not like we're doing something illegal. I'll send you a copy of the PDF of the book. And anybody else, dears?
Brother Shankar, I
Yes,
wanted to
dear.
ask a question.
Yes, Marla.
Whenever I think of ahimsa, it's very hard to not feel paralyzed by that concept, because no matter what we do, we're going to be hurting someone somehow, something, even just existing, breathing air. My white blood cells right now are killing off pathogens.
Mhm.
Something's getting hurt. So how do
Mhm.
we find a balance where we're just not paralyzed
It
by
has to
that?
do,
Yeah.
it has to do with your intentions, dear. All of those things that you mentioned, not all of them, but the things like your white blood cells killing off pathogens and those things, killing things by breathing, those are completely unintentional. It has to do, in this case, with, and I encourage you to read Swami Prabhavananda's book, How to Know God, and his exposition of what ahimsa means for us as people living in the world. It should not paralyze us. There are things that you must do. You must, if you're going to eat a carrot, you're going to have to pull it out of the ground.
Yes.
You're going to have to kill the carrot. There's no two ways about it. Now this is when Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, and by the way, he served as president of the Vivekananda Vedanta, the Ramakrishna Vivekananda Center of New York for a time, Swami Nikhilananda's center. Joseph Campbell was not a vegetarian, and he was being assailed for breaking ahimsa, for being, how can you pretend to be a spiritual aspirant and eat meat? And he endured this for a while, this vegetarian going at him about this. And then he finally said, oh, I would be so horrified to see you coming if I was a carrot. So,
I think the same example goes for a roach. If you have a cockroach you see crawling on your floor, what do? You have to kill it.
Well, Sri Ramakrishna gave us a little example. It's mentioned in the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Those insects that are harmful to us, that are potentially harmful to us, like a cockroach, which can make you ill. He killed them. In his case, it was bed bugs. And he was killing them with the heel of his slipper.
Well, I have to jump in and say something about this because what a lot of people perceive certain critters as dangerous that aren't.
Yes, spiders. People think spiders are dangerous.
I mean,
Snakes.
snakes, yeah, it's like
Ants.
the people that just they can't even hear the word snake. It triggers them, and I understand that, but you know, to kill something that is not harming you and that can be removed in another way really hurts my heart to see that happen. And you know, if you have insects, pest insects in your house and they've kind of overrun it, or there's more than a few of them, you have to do something, you know, because they'll take over and they don't mean to, they're just doing what they do. But if you have the lone little spider in the corner, or, you know, even one of those big tree roaches or whatever they are, you know, they can be taken outside or just ignored, and they'll usually disappear. But most people, it's just like, oh, it's a bug, I'm going to kill it. I had a friend once who said, I will not kill your bugs for you. Because, you know,
Well,
I mean, I know that Sri Ramakrishna smashed those bed bugs, and bed bugs, I mean, I'm sorry, you're going to have to do that. And they don't come in with just one. And that's an example. But there are other examples, like Swami Vivekananda was sitting, I think it's a Panchavati, and he was sitting there in meditation, and he was just surrounded by this cloud of mosquitoes.
no, actually, they looked like fur on his body. That's what Swami, one of his brothers, Swami, said. I forget now which one. It says they looked like they were fur on his body. There were so many.
Yeah.
But he was in meditation. He was unaware of his.
That's true.
Body.
But the Dalai Lama, you know, he doesn't even kill mosquitoes when they're biting him.
Ahimsa is for each, and this is a very productive discussion. It's for each of us to interpret and live according to our own understanding.
Yes.
And the more profound our understanding is, that everything is a vibration of consciousness. An insect, a worm, the highest human being, everything is a vibration of consciousness. How are we going to deal with that? But it's only when we know that, when we truly know that it can govern our behavior honestly and sincerely. And that is what each of these spiritual paths, we're talking this month about Raja Yoga. Next month, we'll talk about Jnana Yoga. The month after that, about Bhakti Yoga, and so on. We're talking about the practices of Raja Yoga. And as the Swami pointed out, ahimsa, being harmless, living in a state of, I want to do no harm, I will do no harm, offers you a kind of happiness and freedom. That what it does is it eliminates your being at odds with the world. When you're no longer at odds with the world, your mind is much calmer. When your mind is calmer, you see more clearly, and you see the truths that will then help govern your thoughts, your speech, and your behavior. But this is not something we can be pious about. We can't just say, oh, I won't do that because, not, and be sincere. We have to be sincere. We learn by our actions.
Brother Shankara.
Yes, hello there, Paul.
Yeah, hi. Good to see everyone. In the Gita, when Krishna and Arjuna are on the battlefield, and Arjuna appears to engage in battle, with his family members and everyone. That it seems like that's a non-pacifistic, that particular scripture seems to point to that there might be a time even for war.
Oh, there is indeed. Sri Krishna is very clear about it, that there is nothing more dear to a righteous warrior than a righteous war. They can then live out their swadharma as a warrior. And no one is there, at least in the way that it was practiced in those days, no one was there who did not wish to be there. So everyone was there as a warrior to practice their art of warfare. And so there was nothing that defies ahimsa here.
At the same time, I think there are certain ways that we can delimit it in our everyday practice.
Oh,
Because
yes.
if we just relegate it to just a purely relative thing, I mean, ahimsa, as Swamiji and Sri Ramakrishna and Gandhiji practiced it, was, utter respect for the human being first and foremost. I mean, Swamiji often ridiculed this idea that, it's just about growing an anthill around you, or, not stepping on a small bug, or even eating meat. Everyone, he's well known for not being a vegetarian. Master was, but he was not. And he said, I mean, in this age of Kali Yuga, you do need warriors, but the struggle is also for peace in the world. And so what Gandhiji said, and I always go back to his interpretation of the Gita, which is often read as a justification of like natural war, which is, I think, very dangerous. And he says, more and more, I can see that it was not Krishna who created the evil. It's because Gandhiji edited the Bhagavad Gita himself, and he has a translation of it. And he says, the evil was in Duryodhana's heart. Was Krishna cunning? No, he was not cunning. He tried his best to prevent war. It was Duryodhana who forced the war. Sri Krishna is the god of the poor, the beggar, the sinner, the son, the father, and the wife, and of everyone. He enters intimately into all our human relations and makes everything holy, and in the end, brings us to salvation.
Well, Divya, you're absolutely right. And Gandhi was absolutely right in his actions. And look at what the actions produced. And his follower, Martin Luther King, produced a parallel result here in the United States. The nonviolence and the practice of satyagraha, as particularly as it involves human beings. The satya, the truth, being that is the divine being in a human suit, no matter how they are in error and therefore able to persecute you, you must treat them as the divine being. All of that is true. And this, and each of us, if we're honest with ourselves, each of us will debate ahimsa again and again and again every day.
But I'm
Or
saying we don't have to. If we just go back to the Sermon on the Mount, even, which Gandhiji also read in alongside the Gita, or even the Imitation of Christ. I mean, it's not just limited to Hinduism. This is a universal idea.
Of course not. Of course it is. Yes, you're right.
That we turn the cheek. We turn the other cheek, even if, it is to our detriment. And we've, returned it again and again.
There's no two ways about the ideal. We never compromise the ideal, but we must not give way to dogma either. We must be sincere with ourselves about who we are and what we truly feel and believe and think now. This is one of the things that Sri Ramakrishna was adamant about.
No.
Ultimately, we come as our self-understanding matures, we come to the ideal. But even Sri Ramakrishna said, even an expert singer cannot keep their voice always on the highest note. And so we must not be judgmental or unforgiving even of ourselves. And we must emphatically not be dogmatic.
On a little lighter note, when Swami Vivekananda was living in America and eating a lot of American food out of necessity, some of the more, dogmatic Hindus criticized him for that diet. And he answered them by saying, well, if you will send me a Hindu cook, to America, I will be very happy to eat a Hindu diet. But I know at times he was really, not in a position to be choosing his menu.
Paul, Swamiji was like Whitman. If he had been said, Swamiji, you contradict yourself, he would have said like Whitman, it was contradict myself. Yes, I contradict myself. I contain multitudes. When he lived with the Meade family in South Pasadena, he quite happily cooked for that family food that suited them, and that included meat. If we try to be doctrinaire about these things, if we try to be dogmatic, we find ourselves painted into a corner. We absolutely must not be dogmatic. These are secondary details. It is for us to pursue the truth according to our best understanding, moment to moment, hour to hour, day by day, and be very truthful with ourselves about who we are, what we want. It doesn't mean we don't practice the yamas and niyamas, but we don't practice them out of dogma. We practice them out of our understanding that they will have great benefit to us spiritually, intellectually, and ultimately in terms of our physical life.
At the same time, I just recall Swamiji's words that, when you do hear I think, erroneous interpretations, or, when nonviolence is used in a kind of just way to deny the ongoing violence, that becomes its own dogma. I agree with you there. But, we also have to keep our seat firm and not, as you said, let go of the absolute ideal, which,
No.
As Christ practiced it, because that is the ideal. And it's not dogmatism to believe in that.
No, it is not. It is not. It is dogmatism to insist that others share your opinion and behave as you see them, or as you see appropriate. That's dogma. And when we inflict it on ourselves, I applaud what you're saying, Divya. Absolutely. We must never compromise the ideal. But when we do in our thoughts, in our speech, and in our actions, we have to be honest with ourselves about why and what we did. And as Swami Swahananda would say, what's done is done. Go forward. So we restore our visualization and our understanding of the ideal, and we do our best to live it. But one of the things that we must not do is insist that others live according to what we believe is the ideal. As you'll find if you read Swami Vivekananda's talk, every man his own sect. Now, of course, we would change the pronoun now. Every person his own sect, but or his or her own sect. Swami Vivekananda said, we are infinite beings. We are infinite beings and unique. Each of us is unique. We will embody that infinite uniqueness and be something beyond all understanding if we follow that to its conclusion.
You know, there's a group of us in the fellowship that are practicing that nonviolent communication still, and you know, we really look very closely at ways of expressing and behaving that are not violent.
And isn't it amazing, Paul, how subtle it is? How subtle our psychological violence toward others is.
It's interesting in that nonviolent communication, you know, the teacher says the most violent word in the English language is the word should.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who you should be or who I should, you know, that the roots of that.
Golfers will tell you the enemy of optimum performance is shoulda, coulda, woulda. So, dears, this is wonderful. This is exactly what this is about. This is exactly what it means to study the art of spirituality together, to discuss and debate these things and try to come to some understanding. And so blessings, blessings, blessings. This is wonderful. Is there anything else before we wrap it up? Well, thanks to each of you who has contributed. Thanks to all of you who were contributing by your attention and your close, your staying with this. So, let there be peace in outer space. Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters. Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees. May the gods be peaceful. May the whole universe be pervaded by peace. Let that infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beings everywhere. That lovely translation is by Swami Yogeshananda. And so I will follow that by saying, may you go in Mother's loving and protective embrace through this time of dreadful transformation. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga, Durga, Durga. May you be safe, may you be cheerful, may you be healthy, and may you have peace of mind. So, until next time, which will be for those of you who wish to join us tomorrow night, we'll be reading the poems in the book Love Poems from God. And we have lovely discussions of those, that testimony of the saints. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks, Brother Shankara.
Mm-hmm.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.